Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we are going to explore A Course in Miracles. With me is Dr. Harris Whitfield, who is the author of Choosing God, a bird's eye view of A Course in Miracles, and also Teachers of God, further reflections on A Course in Miracles. And Dr. Whitfield is also the author of the bestseller, Healing the Child Within. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You're mostly known because of your best-selling book, Healing the Child Within, as a person who is a psychiatrist and psychotherapist dealing with wounded people who have experienced trauma. And yet you have found A Course in Miracles to be very relevant to that work.
Yes, it's closely relevant. If not crucial.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know in the 12-step programs, they talk about the need to open yourself up to a higher power. Many people resist that idea, but essentially that's what A Course in Miracles is about, is it not?
Yes, and of course I resisted that too, up until my probably 30s.
Mm-hmm.
I was an atheist after I had started out conventional Protestant until I was maybe in my early 20s, and then became atheist. I had so many doubts about God, and then started meditating, and with a transcendental meditation, not any particular kind, and what that allowed me to do was to observe what was happening in with my ego chatter that wouldn't stop until finally I just simply said, oh, this is the drunken monkey that I'm observing now.
Yes.
With this chatter. And then I could now open up to letting go to another possibility, which is my relationship to self, others, and God.
How were you first exposed to A Course in Miracles?
In the late 70s. I just heard about it, and I went to a New Age bookstore and found a copy of it there, and got all 3 volumes, which is the way it usually comes.
Yes.
Which is the text, the workbook, and the manual for teachers.
Right. And so basically, this is what one might call bibliotherapy. You began reading, and as a result of your reading, you became a teacher yourself.
Yes, it's what I discovered in the Course is that it's the most impressive and significant spiritual text that I've ever seen, that I've ever read. I probably read it 5 times, and every time I just get revelation after revelation.
Well, many years ago I had the privilege of interviewing Judith Scutch-Whitson, who was the publisher of the book, and she introduced me to Helen Schuckman, who was I guess you'd say, the person who channeled this information, and her colleague who helped her, William Thetford, a psychologist. They were both psychologists at Columbia University, so I and I'm sure many of our viewers are well acquainted with A Course in Miracles at this point in time, but many people are not. So let's go through it. And one of the first things that impressed me about A Course in Miracles, it sort of reminded me of Monty Python, the British comedians who say, everything you know is wrong.
Yes. A lot of what we know is right, but so much of it is wrong spiritually from a Christian perspective, and with other faiths too. That it's certainly worth looking into the Course, because so many psychospiritual skills are imparted as we read and study the Course.
Yeah, and I suppose just entertaining the idea that everything I know might actually be wrong, that in itself can lead to awakening.
Definitely. That happened to me.
Mm-hmm. But where do you go from there? Once you decide that everything you know is wrong, it's still not the same as encountering a correct perspective. Or is there such a thing as a correct perspective?
This is what we're doing is on this planet, the way I see it and understand it, is we're living and exploring the divine mystery, capital D, capital M. And the Course gives us skills to continue to live and explore the divine mystery.
Well, that's a good way to put it, living in mystery. It gives one, I guess it comes back to the idea of humility, being open to learning.
Exactly. Open to learning and exploring and experiencing with self, others, and God. And yet the very phrase, a course in miracles, suggests that, well, once I've mastered this course, I will become a miracle worker. Yeah, and that's true to a large extent, because what we're doing is we are practicing making miracles. And of course, the miracle is not making the physical into the some other physical state, like making one loaf into enough to feed the multitudes, or one fish to feed. But the miracle is really the peace that happens when we choose God and then let go and let God. And that miracle is we experience the peace that then reverberates like when a rock hits a pond, those circles that extend out from that. That's what happens, because we kind of transmit, we reflect, we extend our own peace onto others and resonate with God's love.
There's a concept I discussed in another interview with your wife, the spiritual bypass. That would seem to be a concern here, that if I simply say, okay, I'm opening myself up to God, but I'm not necessarily doing all the inner work on my own pain and suffering, it may become I would say a trap, but maybe even more than a trap, a distraction from the real work that needs to be done. And as a psychotherapist yourself, I'm sure you're aware of this.
Yes, the spiritual bypass is common. It happens often with born again people who, get the light suddenly, and the way to identify it is it doesn't last.
Which is why people often go, I suppose, from one spiritual workshop or book or group to another.
Yeah, or congregation.
Getting sort of a temporary high from it, but not lasting value.
Yeah. So, that's the way is all of these ways are double-edged swords. They have double-edged sword qualities. There is some psychospiritual nourishment, and it can also be a distraction from the real action, which is basically my own pain. And how do I handle that pain? And especially that pain comes up when I get in conflict with others.
Now, does A Course in Miracles deal specifically with those psychological issues?
Yeah. What the Course says to me is, whenever I'm not at peace, I know I'm in my ego, which is the false self, and it's not real, but the ego is a kind of a way of helping feel safe in an unsafe world. And so what the Course is it is a masterful series of books on ego psychology.
Well, let's talk about the ego, because I know the word means so many different things. At times, to me, ego means a kind of mastery of the basic physical necessities of life. For example, I can get up in the morning, get dressed, tie my shoes. Without an ego, I might not be able to do that.
That's right, sure, and that's useful. But it's a wonderful helper, but not a very useful and an even destructive guide or master.
In other words, the ego is necessary for all humans. A child, an infant, doesn't have much of an ego. They need to develop an ego.
In a way, still it's a false self. It's not real, but it does help us navigate our life throughout the years. But then eventually we discover, one way or the other, there's more, and that more is who I really am.
Well, I think I get the feeling that we're using the word ego in slightly different ways, and you're really referring to the false self.
Correct. The ego is the false self. Originally, back in the days of Freud and Jung and the boys, it was really kind of an amalgamation, a combination of both real self and false self. And then the self-psychologists came in, and the object relation psychologists with a clearer and more accurate understanding of real self and false self, or true self and false self.
Well, from a psychological perspective, in terms of ego psychology, the real self is probably not the same as the real self as described in A Course in Miracles.
Yeah, the real self is the soul, which is also connected to the spirit and the mind. Basically, the mind is another term in the Course that means spirit, consciousness, and decision maker. And that decision maker is key, because we can, at any time, we can choose God or we can not choose God. And basically, when we're not at peace, we're not choosing God, we're in our ego.
Well, I think in the modern world, individuals probably feel often that they have many good reasons to not choose God at any given time. They may be angry with God for the way things have turned out, or they may feel that I need to rely on myself, not God, or they look at people who are pious individuals and they say, I don't want that. I don't want to, that kind of piety in my life.
That was me for a number of years, in my mid, probably 20s and 30s. So, and then in my late 30s is when I found the Course. And the simple message of the Course is simply, when I'm not at peace, I can remember. All I have to do is pause and choose God, and then let go and let God's Holy Spirit handle my pain. And to do that, I have to really let go of it and not hang on to it. And then the peace that results is the miracle that then can extend out to others in my circle.
Well, as a psychiatrist speaking this way, you're suggesting that A Course in Miracles and probably other spiritual approaches are useful psychotherapeutic tools. And yet, the field of psychotherapy, Freud, for example, seems to have been pretty much of an atheist, and many professionals in the field of psychology argue that religion is what's wrong with humanity, that the purpose of psychology should be to wean people away from a kind of childish dependence on religion. I've heard the president of the American Psychological Association say as much. Yes,
and of course religion is, like so many other things, a double-edged sword. Like there's a really positive, nurturing, supportive side to many, if not most, organized religions.
Yes.
But then there's the not so positive or supportive, and that's where there's misunderstandings, according to what the Course describes, such as that there's a hell. From the understanding of what the Course says, the only hell is the pain that we experience here on earth when we do not choose God. That's hell, and hell is here on earth. It's not somewhere else that we're going to go to.
Well, one of the aspects of the Course is that it claims, the book itself claims, that the real author is Jesus Christ, speaking through the channel, Helen Schuckman, who transcribed the book. Is it necessary to accept that?
Each person, each reader, each student of the Course has to decide for themselves, the way I see it. I mean, that's what I had to do. That's what many of the people that I've taught about the Course. It's all a trial and error to see what's going to work for you in your psycho-spiritual life.
Yeah. Well, if one approaches it that way, it's not so different from Buddhism in a way. As I recall, the Buddha told his disciples, try it out for yourself, take what works, and ignore the rest.
Yeah, and that's not a all or none situation. That's an open kind of a faith with humility from the Buddha.
Now that I think about it, another parallel between Buddhism and A Course in Miracles might be the notion that in Buddhism you learn these basic truths, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Then when you get into the advanced levels, the Diamond Sutra, for example, it basically says, forget all that stuff. We're going to move beyond it. None of that matters anymore.
And that's where meditation comes in so powerfully.
How so?
When I meditate, I go within and observe what's happening in my mind. And I observe how much monkey chatter continues to go on with all my this and that conflict that I'm having, and what have I got to do next, and what am I going to do, and how am I going to plan this or that, and what's happening, and what am I afraid of. And yet there I am.
Yes.
And I am observing all of that chatter.
Yes.
And sooner or later I'm going to discover that I'm not the chatter. I'm not the monkey. I am the observer.
Yeah.
And the observer, I think, is in the higher self. It's in our higher consciousness, the observer self.
Now, in your best-selling book, Healing the Child Within, you refer to that inner child as the true self.
Yes. Yes, it is. And it's related to what the Course describes as the mind, spirit and consciousness. That's all part of the real self, the child within.
It reminds me of a classic book in Zen Buddhism, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and in which the idea is that the beginner's mind is really the more advanced form. It's like the mind that says, I don't know, I want to learn.
Yeah. And see, that's part of the power of this. It's a great Zen concept, don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then nobody special. I'm nobody special. I'm just here living out my incarnation and exploring the divine mystery, my own divine mystery.
Did you also practice Zen? I seem to recall that...
What I've been practicing is just whatever has evolved in my own consciousness. And there's a lot of Zen in there. And Zen is so simple that it's hard to even imagine how simple it is. We've just got to let go and let God, because that's what's happening.
Yeah. So were you a Buddhist meditator prior to, or a meditator prior to the Course in Miracles?
Yes, yes, I was. I did transcendental meditation,
yeah,
which is simple, just one way, another way of meditating.
Repeating a mantra 20 minutes twice a day.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And from there you became exposed to A Course in Miracles, and as I gather, you find for the work that you do, for the life that you live, A Course in Miracles is really right on target.
It is, and I still forget. So when I forget, and I'm in pain,
mm-hmm.
I have to remember. All I have to do is choose God.
Mm-hmm. What does that mean, choose God?
Choose God over not God, or choose God over my ego.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do is I then pray. And prayer is the powerful way to bring about the miracle for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I choose God, and what I found is the simplest prayer. It's a one-word prayer. Help. So I say, I go within
mm-hmm.
with humility and say, help me, God. Help.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to let go and let God's Holy Spirit do its job.
Mm-hmm. Now, it sounds as if in that description, simple as it is, we've encapsulated the essence of A Course in Miracles.
That is.
But yet, as I understand the Course, there's like 365 lessons, one for each day of the week.
That's right.
So it becomes quite involved. I mean, there's a very extensive philosophy behind it.
And what's so effective the way the Course works is
mm-hmm.
it's through the text is circular. It's like a helicopter flying over the landscape, making a movie
mm-hmm.
of the landscape instead of a single snapshot.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the workbook goes about it a slightly different way, still going from photo to photo of the landscape, but one lesson at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Manual for Teachers is linear.
Mm-hmm.
It says, okay, let's learn about what the Holy Spirit is,
mm-hmm.
and then what the Christ is,
mm-hmm.
and then what our concept of God is according to the Course,
yes.
etc. Beautiful, short chapters in a linear way.
Mm-hmm.
So this way we've got it in this circular understanding, and then a linear understanding, and then we can put it all together.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, there are many different tools in the Course to help break down this compulsion or this lock that the ego sometimes has over us.
And one of the big problems with the ego is misperception.
Mm-hmm.
We perceive one way of understanding that might be totally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why practicing the Course, by choosing God, saying a prayer, asking for help, and then letting go and letting God, then I can get what the Course calls true perception,
mm-hmm.
Which is another way of describing it is right mind versus wrong mind.
Mm-hmm.
And right mind is when we remember and choose God,
mm-hmm.
and wrong mind is when we don't.
Mm-hmm. Now, in your background working with trauma victims in psychotherapy, you worked a lot, as I understand it, with the 12-step programs and self-help movements. I'm under the impression that the Course in Miracles is sort of finding a role in our society not so different from the 12-step program.
It is so similar that in my two books on the Course,
mm-hmm.
I introduced the similarities of the 12 steps and the Course in Miracles. It's just remarkable how similar their wisdom is.
Mm-hmm. And I've just discovered in talking with you that it seems very similar to Buddhism.
Yes.
As well, which maybe there is an important thread that runs through all of these.
Yes.
Which I guess is that people should experiment for themselves, accept what works for themselves, but also always be open to learning something new. When we feel like we already know everything we need to know, that is probably when we're deceiving ourselves.
Yeah. There are a lot of powers in humility, and one of them is don't know.
Don't know.
And the way we find out what is true is that we remember to choose God, ask for help, and then let go and let God.
Ask for help, let go, let God, and maybe something miraculous will happen.
And if I'm still in pain, I do it all over again. Remember, ask for help, and let go and let God, and that might be minute to minute.
And you've now been working with this material for decades.
Yes, since the late 70s.
So you found over that time period that it's stuck with you. It's been effective.
It has.
Dr. Charles Whitfield, thank you so much for sharing your profound perspective and your experience.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us.